back to cinema here, and I did it. I finally completed that list I said I was going to complete. Did it. I spent the last 3 days watching a total of 6 movies in order for me to properly do this list. Now, I suppose I should explain what exactly this list is. Well, if you've watched one of my more recent videos, the one about the brief history of horror cinema, you know that out of all the different eras of horror, there are three big ones: the Golden Age, 1931 to 1949, which is Universal Monsters; the Silver Age, 1968 to 1989, the slasher genre, Night of the Living Dead, those movies; and the Bronze Age, which we are living in right now, that started back in 2012. A new era of creative and imaginative horror movies. And so, I decided that as of right now, what the top 13 horror movies of the Bronze Age are. What new ideas and new imaginative ways has horror decided to adopt. And why top 13? It's 31 backwards, 31st is Halloween, so why not make it that? But before we get to the actual 13, I have 4 honorable mentions I want to shout out here. Honorable mention number 1, Curse of Chucky. Now, this is the first direct-to-video sequel that brought the Chucky series back to its more grounded, more serious roots, and is presented in an enjoyable way. Honorable mention number 2, The Witch. Really more of a period piece that happens to have horror elements in it, but it's still fun to see a family shunned from the rest of society just dissolve into madness. Honorable mention number 3, Lights Out. Based on the online short film, a story about a ghost demon that attacks you when the lights are out. And honorable mention number 4, Cult of Chucky. Admittedly, not the most legit good movie, but still takes the franchise in a new direction with more explanation of the lore of the series while still remaining truthful to the soul of the franchise. Now, with the honorable mentions out of the way, let's finally get down to the top 13 horror movies of the Bronze Age. Let's get to it. Number 13, The Evil Dead remake. You probably weren't expecting a remake on this list, were you? Now, of course, when it comes to remakes, especially with the horror genre, people think that it's going to be bad and not really live up to the original. But with this remake, people were surprised by how good it is. I mean, there's enough winks to the original where when they happen, you're like, oh yeah, this is a remake. Well, let's get back to the movie. It is its own thing, and it does bring new stuff to the story. And a nice addition that they make is that in this remake, the reason why are at the cabin, in contrast to them going up to the cabin in the original just to go to the cabin, in this one, they're helping their friend detox, so when the demons start popping up, they're not really sure of what they're seeing is real or not. And it does bring certain new parts to this movie that are very interesting to watch. And it's just a whole lot of gore that's just also fun to watch. Now, number 12, Split. Now, I know there is some debate of whether or not a psychological thriller movie is horror, but if Silence of the Lambs can be both, so can Split. So, Split is about a man named Kevin who kidnaps a few girls, and he has 23 personalities, and he is about to welcome the 24th. Now, we don't see all the personalities, but of the handful that we do see, James McAvoy does a really good job at distinguishing each personality. Like, you actually believe that he does have these personalities in his head. And this is a return to form for a director that's been usually known for just making movies that are just so bad that they're hilarious. But this movie will definitely keep you at the edge of your seat as you're wondering what the heck is going on when it comes to its ultimate climax. Now, number 11, The Cabin in the Woods. You know how I said the Bronze Age started back in 2012? Well, this is the movie that kickstarted this age. So bravo to Cabin in the Woods. Now, even though I do want to admit the fact that Cabin in the Woods started this new age, The reason why it's this low on the list is because some people say that it's really more comedic than actually is horror. And granted, there is a lot of satire in this film, but not really, but doesn't really go into full satire. It still keeps its story serious and pays homage to basically every kind of horror there is. And if you really have any interest in watching it, watch it because even if you don't probably get the most scares, you will have a lot of fun homages and a lot of laughs watching it. Number 10, The Conjuring. Who would have known that we would have a horror cinematic universe that's not Universal Monsters? So, Conjuring is basically focused on a couple during the late 20th century who go around to different houses and such solving the supernatural cases. And this movie is really presented in a distinguished way that's a little bit more sophisticated than a lot of other horror movies, especially those that came out in the 2000s. Now, this is something that really does its job to creep you out, but you're also rooting for these guys to solve the case. Don't really have much else to say other than that's definitely one worth checking out. Number 9, the 2017 version of Stephen King's It. Now, I know this movie's only been out for like a month, but it's already earned its spot. Now, the mini-series back in 1990 make the story seem a little bit more goofy and ridiculous, but this movie does bring its own grounded, scary creepiness of the adaptation. Now, granted, there are probably some people that say that the scare is a little bit more gimmicky than anything, but there is a certain level of creepiness that can't be denied. And another reason why this is on the list, because in addition to the creepiness, this is probably one of the horror movies that has the best character development of its genre. I mean, all the kids are great. Like, you're really there for them. You connect with them. You want to see them make out on the other side of this okay. And that's what's really impressive about this movie. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. It continues to break box office records. Number 8, Gerald's Game. Again, another Stephen King adaptation. This one was thought to be unfilmable, but Netflix decided, you know what, we're going to make it anyway. And this is probably a little bit more psychological thriller, but again, that's still horror. And it focuses on a woman who's chained to a bed after her husband, who's about to get kinky, has a heart attack and dies. She begins to hallucinate, and there's this man in the corner of the room, and I already did a video on that creepy performance, so check that out. That has gotten a lot of views. But it's a really gripping movie, and you really feel the pain that the woman is going through, the fear that she has, and it's definitely one worth Netflixing and chilling to. Number 7, It Follows. Granted, when I first watched this, it was slightly difficult to get into it because there's a lot of quiet places in this movie that probably didn't need it. However, this film needs to be applauded because it takes a theme that's seen in a lot of horror movies but turns it on its head. Now, thanks to the counterculture of the 1960s, we have a lot of horror movies where if you have sex in a horror movie, you're basically one of the first to get killed off. However, this movie takes that concept of sex, saying that people who have sex get killed and the only survivor is a girl that's a virgin, but puts them in a situation where the main girl we know isn't a virgin because she has to have sex in order to be stalked by this demon, but also sex is also a possible way of getting out of this situation as well. And this is really interesting how a movie managed to take one of the most cliche themes of the genre, it completely turns it over and makes it kind of groundbreaking, actually. And it's on Netflix as well, so grab some popcorn. Alright, now we're on to number 6, Don't Breathe. Now, directed by the same guy who made the Evil Dead remake, Don't Breathe focuses on a girl and 2 guys who break into this house at night owned by a blind man and try to take a large sum of money they know he has. Now, the blind man kills one of the guys, and now it's a cat and mouse game between the 2 other people and the old blind man. And while they're playing this cat and mouse game, they discover a very dark secret of this old man, and the creepiness of the human nature gets cranked up all the way. I mean, it takes a minimal. Sorry about that. It takes a minimalistic approach that I think is really working for the genre in modern day, and it was released in August of 2016. But go ahead and check it out. They're again directed by the same guy who did the Evil Dead remake, and I think you'll just have a loving good time. Loving good time. Why the hell did I say that? Anyway, time for the top five. Number five, Hush. Now, this is a Netflix film. It is pretty similar to Don't Breathe in the fact that that's one setting for most of the film, a house, and it's really focused on only a small handful of characters, mainly the killer, who's a criminal, sort of on the run kind of thing, and the protagonist, an author, a female, but she's deaf. And this really takes the approach, and this is really interesting to see a protagonist who has a disability that's trying to survive getting killed in her own home. And the suspense is very much alive in this film. You see how the criminal deals with people that are trying to get in on his kill. And it's just very interesting how this movie does it. And it's definitely one that you should check on Netflix as well. Basically, I wouldn't say they're all going to be good to watch on Netflix. Number four, Oculus. The idea of a haunted mirror is actually pretty interesting in itself, seeing as we don't really have any haunted mirror movies. But this one takes it in an even further direction by having one of the people believe that the mirror is not actually haunted, that he was just crazy when the incident that the family went through 11 years ago happened, but the other person is convinced that the mirror is haunted. And you see these two argue, and you begin to wonder if the mirror is actually haunted either. And you begin to wonder, hey, it's haunted, but wait, maybe it's not. And you're not really sure if it is supernatural or it's just two people that are just simply losing their mental state. It keeps you guessing, keeps you intrigued, and this is probably a new Halloween classic. All right, the big three. Let's get to it. Number three, Get Out. Yeah, when people heard that a comedic entertainer was going to have his directorial debut with a horror movie, they were probably going to think it's not going to be that big of a deal. But honestly, it's a really big deal. I mean, the focus is on a guy, an African American guy, who goes home to his white girlfriend's parents' home, and racism is a main theme in this movie, but it's not taking the direction you think it'll take. I mean, yes, racism is a theme in this movie, but instead of like having white people being prejudiced against blacks, there's a bunch of white people that apparently love blacks so much they try to appropriate their style, behavior, and culture and give it to them. It's I probably didn't explain that properly, but it is completely different from what we were expecting, and it really shines a new light on racism, especially in modern America. And it is a classic that will always be remembered in the horror genre. Number two, The Babadook. I mean, it seemed like for a while, once this Australian film hit the US, that this was one of the films that everyone was talking about, along with Guardians of the Galaxy. The Babadook centered on an Australian family, a mom and a son, and the husband slash dad was killed on the day that the son was born 6 years ago. And the and it's very interesting of this inclusion of the monster in the film because as you continue to watch the film, it is obvious that the monster, even though it is real, is really more of a manifestation of the grief of the family, of the trauma that the mom experienced when she saw her own husband get killed in a car accident while their son was about to be born. And it's an optimistic ending, but probably not one that a lot of people expect from a horror movie. I mean, yes, she defeats like the Babadook, but it can't be killed. It's just something that they have to learn how to live with and how to move on. And that's really a representation of how families should deal with grief, of how they should deal with the loss of a loved one. and it's really more of like a teaching movie about just the dark reality of what life can bring to people. And it kind of helps that it was mistakenly taken for a gay icon. But again, Netflix, chill. Alright, the number one movie of the current enlightenment of horror is Raw. I don't even know where to begin with this movie. This is a movie that's so layered in symbolism and metaphors that you just have to watch on Netflix for yourself to understand what I'm trying to get at. But without really talking too much about it, let me give you the very general premise. A first year college student is dropped off at a veterinary school where both of her parents went to, and that's where her sister, a sophomore, is at as well. Now, the girl was raised as a vegetarian from the very beginning, but once she's at college, she discovers she has a huge craving for raw meat that turns into cannibalism. And that's pretty much all I can say. I feel like if I explain any more about the plot of the movie, I'll be doing a disservice. Now, there's a lot of interpretation about what this film is trying to say, and while the director of the movie has given a little bit of explanation, she's pretty much leaving the interpretation up to the fans. And while there is many different interpretations, here's how I choose to interpret the movie. So the girl is obviously raised in a home where she's raised with her parents' values, like a lot of people are. But when she's off on her own, when she's off into the real world, she discovers that she has her new things and that she has a darkness in her, so, like demons that she has to fight, which is can be said for a lot of people that are going to the real world for the first time. Not as dark or as intense as cannibalism, but you get the point. Like everyone discovers their own inner darkness, their own demons. Now the film says that we have a choice when it comes to this. We can either choose to give into it to allow ourselves to be, for back of a better term, the animal that we believe ourselves to be, our so-called true self, or we can make the moral decision ourselves to suppress those, to try to find a solution of how to live with it but never actually act upon it. And that's how I choose to look at that movie. But again, this is a movie that has so much symbolism and imagery and metaphors that you have to watch it yourself in order to actually try to understand what the film is trying to be and what it's trying to say. But I believe that this is going to be a movie that'll be talked about in the genre for decades to come. And those are the top 13 Bronze Age horror movies. Now, again, we are still in the midst of the Bronze Age. It's as strong as ever, and it shows no signs of slowing down. So, what are your thoughts? Comment below, like, subscribe, share, Dr. Cinema. I promise the next video it's not going to be a Dr. Cinema diagnosis or a top list. I'll probably even do a play-by-play review or a movie face-off. Probably a play-by-play review. But again, Dr. Cinema. See you next time.